way that you like. So I'm going to begin to share my screen and we can hop right in. Hold on one sec. I'm going to put us on to this so you can all see. Great. So can everybody see okay? Maybe just Vincent. Good. Yeah. That looks okay. Yeah. Awesome. So Vincent mentioned this sort of terminology, the science of reading and the idea of shining readers. And what I want to just quickly say about that is that today we're going to be digging deep into the principles of the science of reading and also what Vincent and I and our team at Lit Life have done to create and encircle that work with a 21st century view of the way that we can all help our kids to really shine as readers right from the very, very beginning. So, so there's obviously, want to just start by saying that we're all, I think, one of the things I'm excited about in terms of this conversation is that we as educators, I think standing in this moment in time, having an opportunity to really think deeply about the meaning and purpose of reading in the lives of our kids, giving them comfort, giving them joy, giving them an appreciation of language, also just the sheer power that comes from knowledge building and feeling safe in the world, even when lots of are unclear, and also just in these times when we are faced with obviously a pandemic that has spread around the world. It's a challenge to all of us in so many ways. And I think for our kids to find a home in the pages of a book and in story is more important now than ever before, to give them some sense of a place of comfort and safety and also hope and joy and delight. We too, Vincent and I have worked together for years. I mean, wow, I want to say more than 20 years, right, Fee, at this point? I think so. Yes, and we were like 5 years old at that. No, we have been together a long time, and we've met in when we were both teaching in New York City, and then from there in both of our international work. And now we're together. Vincent, as many of you know, is the director of international at Lit Life PD, and I'm the founder of that organization. And after this session, if those of you who don't know about Lit Life PD, we work both virtually and in person, where one day we hope again to be able to do, but for right now, for sure, remotely as we're doing here, to support the lives of teachers and administrators across the board. And so we can be reached, you'll find, and we'll give you some of our contact information. So today, in this session, we're going to keep an eye on the chat bar, like I said. So if you have questions, and then in further sessions, if you're interested, we'll do a lot more interactivity in terms of more of a workshop approach. But today, we're going to really kind of give you a big overview of our thinking and our work and the leadership that we're doing around this work. So just quickly in terms of what we'll do today, the last book I wrote was a book about the reading development, and in that book, I spent a lot of time thinking with children about what they perceive to be reading development. So I'm actually going to put some of that out there to you today too, so you can hear a little bit about, from a child's perspective, what actually is needed in the teaching of reading. So today we're going to identify 5 key qualities of what we call, what Vincent and I call shining readers. This idea that reading is shining from every possible, from your brain, from your spirit, from your soul, and that we want to harness that. We want to make sure kids get access to it as early as possible. And that we're going to do it in a way that feels humane and feels compassionate and also feels rigorous to the work of knowledge building. We're going to identify some major areas of reading development today, some that you know that are very, very familiar to you, and others that might make you say, that's interesting. I never thought of putting those things together. We're going to illuminate the power of the science of reading and its hallmarks. We've been doing a lot of work across many different sites to build that work and think about that work, and also stand on the shoulders of some great research. We're going to share with you practical ways to implement the principles that we talk about. So you'll leave today with some really solid, concrete, and I think pretty awesome ideas for how we can do that. And then we'll just, the best practices that we talk about today, again, a lot of this may be you just saying, hey, I feel good because I do a lot of this, but you also, I'm hoping this will just open our conversation up to questions, wonderings. I mean, I've been having lots of those for my whole career. And I think that's part of we need to do that. We're supposed to do that as educators for our kids on behalf of our children. So one of the, just in terms of thinking about for your work, is to take a moment this morning to really just breathe deeply in, take your own breath for your own learning and your own professional growth and personal growth, and just to be yourself here with us today. The work you do is precious and so important to children. And I think as much as their spirits shine when they come into our rooms, your spirits shine too. And anything that we say here today, anything that does feel new, not to feel uncomfortable with it, but to really just breathe into it and know that grappling with material is part of what we do. This scene is from one of our Lit camps. I created a program, some of you I think know, called Lit Camp, and it's a summer literacy program that's all across the world and started at Lit World, my organization, and nonprofit work in the field in 2010, and then was published by Scholastic in 2012. So some of these scenes you'll see from there, but that's where I've really learned a lot about the integration of the science of reading, the work of how children's brains develop around reading, and what's happening to them. So when Vincent and I talk today about shining readers, we're going to talk about how shining readers make connections, not only in terms of content, not only I'm reading about a lion and then I also read about a tiger. Of course they do that too, for sure. But also that shining readers make connections in language and phonemic development and phonics by connecting one sound to another sound to another sound, by connecting the visual look of language from one visual look to another, like they're doing when they're reading and writing and speaking in multiple languages. Shining readers wonder and are curious, not just about the lion and the tiger, but also about how does language work actually? When we have a word in front of us, what actually went into the building of that word? The shining readers are curious about the words themselves. Shining readers are curious about the way language works and how grammar works. So when a child is learning a second language or a third language, it's not a sense of a deficit, like, oh, poor, woe is me, I didn't know this other language. I am so opposed to that, but actually that it's an asset-based approach. A shining reader is using one language to build on another language, to build on another, and you all know that better than anybody, but that they're wondering and curious about language, and they're wondering and curious about sound, and they're wondering and curious about the alphabetics of language. They're wondering and curious about all things. Shining readers are sparking ideas within themselves and others. So that too, also, yes, about if I'm reading about astronauts and ballet dancers, but also sparking ideas about grammar. Why is it that certain words that end this way always tend to mean that? Or why is it that the idea that I'm having about the grammar of my language actually is true? Also, that hypothesis is true in English also. Those are ideas that children have about language, and often we're not spending a lot of time talking to them about that. We get right into sparking ideas about content. The children are very curious about language, and that's part of what we'll seize on. Shining readers also are building new ideas. So things that we never thought to teach them about language, they're also growing within themselves. And then finally, shining readers are always reflecting, not only on the learning that they're doing when they're doing their learning, again, around absorption of content, they're definitely doing that, but also that they're reflecting on how much they appreciate alliteration in a poem, or how much they appreciate this sense of white space in a nonfiction article, or how they're reflecting on simply how words are put together and how words are built. Those are all things that our shining readers are doing. So the question of today is, the question that Vincent and I will answer together, or at least respond to in a way that builds that conversation, is how do we then cultivate shining readers? So when I walked into this Lit camp last summer, and that was what one of our lit campers had made just for me for that day. She's not only writing because she wants to convey meaning, she's writing because she's savoring the sound of language, the words themselves. She's learned, think about how much she's learned how to do just by writing those words. And we're going to talk today about this idea of the integration of reading and writing. I often say that reading is like breathing in and writing is like breathing out. And in this work that we do with Shining Readers, we're really thinking about both of those things. And then, of course, the foundation of all foundations, which is oral language itself and storytelling, which is already building and building and building inside that child. So first words, first steps, first learnings, every one of those things is such a milestone. Those of you who may have children in your own home or grandchildren, or you're a godparent to some child somewhere in your personal lives, have known that moment of the thrill when, and as a teacher, when you see the child's first word or first steps. But learning to read is a thrill unlike no other. That sense of the opening and the awakening, that sense of putting your hand under the rushing water and knowing it spells W-A-T-E-R. That's a famous story from the life of Helen Keller. And for myself, that has always been a seminal story in my teaching, no matter what the children, where the children, what they're doing, what they're challenged by. That idea that you could put your hand under that water and feel the sense of written language that is giving and conveying meaning is a really powerful, powerful thing. So I want to share with you the Lit Life PD approach to the science of reading, and more importantly, to the idea of this, how we grow shining readers all across the board. This is a model that I've used with Vincent to build lots of curriculum across these last several years. The curriculum has been really successful. We've seen incredible growth in reading skills in the students we work with around these skills. And I think one of the hallmarks of our work is that we're not just thinking about pulling language apart, but we're thinking about how we put language together. And the way we do that is with these two legs of the stool, which is the social emotional piece and the engagement piece, is what really holds up this idea of the science. The way that I'm going to define this, and the way it's defined in many different contexts, is that when we talk about the science of reading today, we're talking about phonemic awareness, we're talking about phonics, we're talking about fluency, fluent text reading, that sense of smoothness. We're talking about vocabulary, and we're talking about comprehension. Those are powerful, powerful forces in the growing brain of a reading child. But what is never going to happen is that child is never going to do any of those things without these things underneath it. That's the thesis that we've proven in the work that you all do every single day and the important work that you do, but that those social emotional skills around strengthening one's self-concept as a language learner, as a literacy learner, as a decoder, as a phonemic awareness user, all of that has to be strengthened by a sense of resilience. Like when I get to a part I don't understand, I'm trying to break down a word I don't know, that I have an identity, I am a reader, I am a shining reader. And then two, the idea of engagement itself, that we can build. We talk a lot about fluency in the work in the field. I'm sure you've seen lots and lots about fluency, but to me, it's actually just as much about stamina, the idea of engagement, about kids building their reading muscles and really wanting to read. So when you give them things they don't really want to read, not that interesting to them, of course, we all have to do that time after time. And believe me, I spend time, as you know, in my work as an author, reading things that sometimes I have to plow through and wade through myself. But I have a high stamina. And the reason I have a high stamina is because I'm engaged with the work. And that's that science of reading work around phonemics and phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension is never going to happen without us really saying what is going to engage my students. And Vincent's going to talk a bit about that as we go. Just some quick definitions. And I know somebody already asked the question about, will we be able to have these slides? And I know Vincent's going to answer this at the end. Just quickly, I'll say that we are definitely going to share this content with anybody who's been registered for this. And that will be sent to you later on after. These are standard definitions to the work, but just so that we're all on the same page. oops, I think I left phonemic awareness off of this. Phonemic awareness is the sound of language, the word parts, the ways that children are putting words together. And phonics itself is building on that. So we're breaking words down even further to connect the sound of in words to the combinations of letters that they can, as they grow, as they read, as they spell. Fluency is the ability to read accurately, rapidly, and with expression. That's what we sometimes call the reading mind. When you read a mystery or you read something that you like, let's say it's an email from a beloved person in your family, you're naturally fluent because you're engaged with that text. You feel a sense of resilience to that text. But fluency is key to the work that we're going to talk about around the science of reading. And then vocabulary is not just a list of words that we give at the end of the week, but actually it's a range of words. So if I'm in the midst of, for example, right now I'm writing a new book, I'm in the midst of lots of words like these, and I'm really playing around with them. But when I'm out in the world and I'm absorbing other people's experience, my vocabulary is expanding all the time. And for children, it is important that we talk about the words that the children are listening to and hearing, and also where is the moment where we can break those words down and make those words a part of that child's daily lexicon. And then finally, reading comprehension is happening all the time. It's not one or the other. It's not, I do this before I do that. I think in that way, I push against a little bit the old view of the science of reading, that one thing has to happen first before the other thing. The child is comprehending always, and you know this, you've seen it yourself. The very first minute they are decoding a word, their comprehension is all about the pictures on the page, the sound of your voice, what they know from their background knowledge. So all of that is always happening. And I like the definition around the interactive process of the student and the written content. So I want our students to enjoy it. I want them to experience delight. That's why sense of reading, language, literacy skills, social emotional learning, and engagement are so important. That's why when we think about the work we do, how we build that community, how we say to our students, I believe in you, I trust in you, when we're breaking down language and building it back up again, when we're reading to breathe in and breathe out, those things are all important to us. These are the kinds of messages I want my students to have, not you have some deficit and then your brain is empty, and that's why we're going to have to load you up with information about phonics and vocabulary, but actually I trust that we're going to do this together. This is exciting. Language is amazing. Decoding is amazing. And comprehension is what's going to happen for us. And our shining readers are always coming to us with their own life and stories, with their family and cultural stories, with their linguistic stories. The shining reader sits in the middle of that. The shining reader is not pushing any of those things away in order to study the nature of phonics and the nature of vocabulary, of phonemic awareness. The child is embracing that to say, this is how I can build my own story. I always say that the idea of the science of reading to me is more like making a Lego set. You have the Legos, you start to build them, but your own imagination has to come into play too, or else you're just making blocks. There's nothing that interesting. The child starts to make a castle or a fort. That's really where shining readers comes in.
So when you add into that, can you just go back to the previous one? I think particularly in today's situation where kids are learning at home, I think especially the child's family and cultural story is even more pivotal. It really is. I mean, now for the first time, we are in the homes of families. And it's really important to really think about, like, how do we get families to be a part of this empowerment of shining readers? Sorry, Pam.
No, V, I appreciate you saying that. And I think that for me, the thing I never thought in the sort of, I don't know, maybe the last 2 decades of the work we do as teachers of literacy, for me, when I looked at it, I said, what I don't want to be missing is exactly this. This is what is going to help a child move from one language to another language to another language, to say, we're honoring and delighting in the language structures, the decoding structures of your own home language. And also that the more that child can write independently, the more that child is working. I always say the best phonics instruction is the teaching of writing. It's the very best phonics instruction there is, because that child is actually practicing the work of language and decoding herself or himself. And for our kids to know that their stories do matter, And in today's world more than ever, because children's voices need to be amplified, is that idea that language is the Lego of human understanding. You know, those Lego blocks. It's like we're not building out of nothing, we're building out of something, and the something is incredibly important, and that's the child's life. And we have to keep that in the front of our experience. I know those of you who've heard me speak before know that I do talk a lot about what's in the child's heart that they bring with them to this work. My colleague Georgia Hurd and I, who writes books about maps of the heart, in fact, her most recent book, which I think is called Awakening Maps of the Heart, I think is what it's called. She actually has several examples of beautiful maps of children's hearts from all over the world that Lit Life and Lit World shared with her. And you can see those in that book. But I love having children design these maps and then make them throughout the year, not just once at the beginning of the year, but all year long, so that I can see changes in children and I can say, what are the most authentic ways that we're going to get children to read and write independently so they can practice those science of reading skills that are developing in their growing brain. I happen to love how much emphasis Maddie in this heart gave to Marvel Comics. I think that's really important to know about her as a reader. And I think that the combination of her love for Marvel Comics and her love for baseball, which you can see in here, is important to me because that's going to help me think about what vocabulary building she's already done, what background knowledge she has, how she looks at the world as a fluent reader. It's more likely she's fluent as a Marvel comic reader than maybe something else. Her mom has told me she's concerned about some other aspects of Maddie's reading development. So I want to start where there's a strength, not start where there's a deficit, and ask Maddie, what is it about Marvel Comics that makes reading feel easy to you? Let's look at those together and actually really decode our understanding of what makes you a shining reader when you come to Marvel, but not so much when you come to your science textbook. Let's talk about that. And then two, when I think about my students as shining readers, it's what I want to know about them is also because I want to know what is it that's going to drive them in terms of decoding language and becoming a master at language, whatever that language is and however many languages our kids are learning. Something I learned about Jonathan from his self-portrait. And again, we did these repeatedly this year. So Jonathan didn't just do one. We did them once a month for the entire year and they changed every time. Was something I really liked to know about him by the spring is that he was doing things that he had never done before. And he was more powerful as a reader, as a writer, as a student. And he was identifying himself that way, which I thought was amazing. And then one more thing, in thinking about that, back to that idea of that social emotional component is that when we think about ideas like belonging to a community, having courage in that community, showing curiosity in that community. I want my students to know that writing means they can write all around the page, that they can draw or trace their thumbprint and write inside that they are uniquely placing their imprint on the world. And that unique imprint is something that nobody else can copy. It's delightful to us. And through that is how we're going to be decoding the language we're learning and also decoding perhaps in multiple languages. And for me, I think some of these activities that feel a little more artistic and creative are also very helpful for me, not only getting to know my students, but also for obviously for having them get to know each other. So when I do something like the thumbprint or the map of the heart, it's my students feeling more a sense of belonging in their classroom so that, or on the Zoom classroom, whichever the case may be, so that when we do the hard work of this immersion and instruction, my students are at ease, like these guys are from Lit Camp. They're very confident. They're very curious because we've built that safe space. So spoken language is happening. It's being absorbed or immersed by our students. For me, my first work was as a teacher of the deaf. So it might not be spoken language, it might be signed language, but that's immersed and absorbed by the brain. Written language, though, needs a little more instruction to become part of that neural imprint. And that's where we start to dig deeply into that science of reading. What is that neural imprint? What can we do to actually foster a more robust way of actually helping our kids' brains develop in terms of language and really thinking about that idea of decoding? And so with that, I'm going to turn it to you, Vincent, to help us take a tour inside that brain and to give us some classroom practice as well.
Definitely. So just like Pam said, learning to read is neither about just pure comprehension, neither pure about decoding. It's definitely an experience. And even more thinking about that, it's not just an academic process, there is definitely an emotional process to that. And we want to make sure that when we're talking about reading, particularly, that we think about, there's two ideas, foundational skills and comprehension work oftentimes. And they work hand in hand. You don't do one or the other, you do both simultaneously. Now, I know that oftentimes in schools, we might go deeper into one area, kind of just foundational skills, and kind of go, oh, well, comprehension will work later on, or will happen eventually. No, what we're inviting you to think about is how can we do both of them together, and how can we marry both of them together so that every student has an opportunity to be successful. So Pam, can you just go to the next slide, if you don't mind?
Yep.
Awesome, cool. All right, so we know from the science of reading that the brain is really, really complex, right? Obviously, we know that. And this is just a great image of what our brain is using while we're reading. So the science of reading, what has happened is that they've taken 40 years of research and kind of said, so what exactly is helping kids become successful readers? And they've actually done some studies, particularly neuroscience. And this is a great image of like how our brain is really working. The frontal lobe is really looking at fluency, grammatical use of, it's actually processing that idea. And then our temporal lobe, so further back to our brain, we're looking at phonological awareness, decoding, and looking at the sounds. And then finally, close to the back of our brain, the angular gyrus is looking at like combining the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. There's a lot that's happening there. And so based on that information, what Scarborough has done and said, wait a second, let's figure out what are the steps, what are the strands that need to happen in order for our kids to be successful. And here he's listed 8 of them. And, you know, I'll be really honest with you, when Pam and I were looking at this, we're like, it sounds great. Pretty, you know, for me, even for us, we're like, what does this mean? What are we trying to figure this out? And so for us, we know that let's make it simple, but also smart. And so what we decided to think about based on the work that we've been working throughout the world, districts and schools, is that the teaching reading is really 2 big ideas, foundational skills and comprehension. Foundational skills and comprehension. So just take a second. Here we go. So here we go. Foundational skills. No worries, Pam. You're ahead of me. Foundational skills are these 5 ideas here, right? In order for students to become successful readers, we want to ensure that we empower students with these 5 ideas: oral language, phonological awareness, print concepts, phonics, and syllabication. So we've been talking quite a bit. So take literally 10 seconds and in the chat, just take a moment, kind of go, what surprises you on that list, or what confirms you on that? I was like, yeah, totally, I agree with that. That's what we definitely need. Just take a moment, react to what is happening on that page. So in the chat for us. Take another 10 more seconds. So yeah, definitely. I see ideas of structured language, oral language, morphemic analysis. Yeah, this is really deconstructing foundational skills, because in many ways, I feel like we've done this all, right? But I think the idea here is to really be able to purposefully name these skills out. For example, what is the difference between morphemic analysis skills versus syllabication? There is a big difference there, definitely. Now, can you go to the next slide? Here we go. So for those who may be kind of like, well, what exactly does this mean? This is a great chart that just talks about what exactly are the differences between, for example, syllabication and morphemic analysis skills. So just take a moment and let's just kind of look this over, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So for those we've had the pleasure of working together, you know that I'm huge on oral language. Pam's like, enough of oral language. Yeah, totally. Oral language is a huge thing. But what we found interesting when thinking about the science of reading is the additional ideas of syllabication, morphemic analysis, and skills, right? We love the fact that how it's really deconstructed. And the science of reading the purpose of science of reading was really to help teachers teach. Right? It really was not saying you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. It's like saying, here's a guide to help us become even more informed practitioners. So once our students have the foundational skills, then we go into the comprehension, which would be the next slide. And so these are the 5 skills for comprehension that we're thinking about. Reading fluency, and Pam talked about that already, vocabulary, and then there's comprehension is even divided into the development of comprehension, looking at comprehension through literary texts. So in other words, text, and informational text. And we love the fact particularly that it's about informational text. We know that as readers, we're reading more informational text now than we probably have. Right? And so it's really important that even our earliest readers or our youngest readers are exposed to informational text. Don't get me wrong, I love Poppleton, but we also have to love the other stuff that's out there. And so this again is just a summary of what do those terms mean of comprehension, from reading fluency to all the way down to informational text. And again, just like Pam said, we're going to be sharing this with you. So don't feel like you're like, I can see people taking pictures. It's good. We will share this with you. So now, thinking about the science of reading, those are the 10 ideas of what students should be instructed with. How do we make this come to life? That's a big question. It sounds great, but you must be thinking like, that's really important. And because these skills just don't happen at once, they happen simultaneously. In order to become readers, you need to really use them interwovenly. So let's talk about a practical way that we've been looking at. Actually, Pam, can you talk a little bit about The Rooster? I know this is your favorite book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lately my favorite book. Yeah. One of my many favorite books. I've been, I think some of you might already know, but I spend a lot of time looking at children's literature and recommending children's literature to teachers, and also bringing children's book authors with me around the world, including Carmen Agrediti, who's one of my favorite friends to work with. In fact, this summer we made a video series together for Lit Camp. One thing I do love about, and what I wanted to sort of punctuate, if you will, this conversation with Vincent and I spoke quite a bit about this, because in our work doing professional development, we do a lot of work with authentic text. And one of the things I just wanted to remind us, because those slides that we've just viewed are pretty heavy, very, we've put a lot of work into deconstructing or decoding this idea of what the science is that's happening inside of a child as they read. But remember, we're talking about real children. So when they go back to doing their real authentic reading, they're looking at texts like these. And what I want to say is, do not underestimate these texts. So if you look inside a book like this, I mean, there's so much going on here on every level, but it's an amazing book. But what's happening is that there is everything that Vincent was just talking about, the child has to do. If the child's reading on his or her own, or you're reading it aloud and modeling for the child, all of those things, think about how you can use your read alouds in a different way. Think about, we tend to only use the read aloud. Well, maybe you don't, but I'm just generalizing across the many different classrooms I spend time in, is that we tend to use the read aloud to model comprehension. We much less tend to model foundational skills when we're reading aloud. And yet Carmen, in order to write this book, had to actually know a lot about language. In fact, both her language of Spanish and also her language of English, this book is amazingly beautifully languaging, and there's a lot of both languages in this book, which I absolutely love, and I wish more authors would write like this. But what I think is important to know about reading aloud and to reading to children is that Vincent shared with you the definitions of some of these aspects of the science of reading. I'm keeping that in my mind as I read to children, or as I sit side by side with a child reading this book independently, is every single thing that you saw in both of those charts is happening in this text. And so keep that in your mind, just that authentic reading and authentic text are part of the work of science of reading. Just like when you look outside at nature and you know that there's a scientific reason for why that flower is growing outside in your garden bed, you're also amazed at the miracles of nature. That's how I see the science of reading. It's in fact, my mother gave my husband and me two, I can't remember the name of the plant now, but it like flowers constantly all summer. And yesterday, one more flower just came, and I just thought, wow, that is amazing. There's definitely a scientific reason for it. And my husband immediately went to Google it to see how is that still happening. But I also want to just take a minute for the miracle. And I think that's true with language too. It's just amazing that Carmen could put this together into a story. And I want my kids to see that what went into that was oral language, was phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, fluency, everything went into that. And that's what they're going to do as they start to break down the text.
And I think, Pam, the science of reading has given us information on how to actually teach reading. It's just like, when we're baking. Pam and I always talk about baking when we get together. There's a science to baking,
yes,
right? But then at the same time, we want to find love of baking, right? We want to find the passion for it. And it's not just because we have to bake, but we want to find a real purpose for it. And I think that's important when we're talking about the science of reading, that how do we make sure that children are still shining or are joyful through the experience of reading? It's not just about, that's great that you're at level whatever, or that you can decode everything. We want to ensure that they still actually enjoy the actual process. So
actually, I love what you said about baking. That's such a great metaphor for today. I think that's beautiful, because baking is actually very scientific, which is what I like about it, because I'm not as intuitive as a cook. I mean, I can make something following a recipe, but baking, you actually have to stay to the recipe. And I think and yet it is going to be singularly yours, like my Aunt Rita's marble cake, which will never come again since she passed. Bless her soul, but but still I can try, and I'm going to get as close as I can. So I think that's important. Back to you.
And I think it's about also kind of like having that conversation, like what's going to help me become a better baker? And you and I always have that conversation. And I think that's really the whole idea, is to have conversation with students, kind of like, this is what's going to help you. Let's have this conversation. So at Lit Life, Pam and I have been working on really how do we therefore use that great research, that great information from science of reading, but also really create joy. How do we get students to become those shining readers? And so we think about 5 ways to implement, or 5 stars to implement science of reading. And these are the stars. They might sound familiar. First thing we want to make sure is connect. Afterwards, wonder, spark, build, and then finally reflect. So you might remember those 5 terms because they were in the beginning, who are shining readers. And we're taking those ideas and really thinking about, like, how can we create units? How can we create lessons around using those words? And so in this next graphic, we want to make sure that these 5 ideas, connect, wonder, spark, build, reflect, is really thinking about in the center would be the shining reader. It is a process of how do we create units? How do we create our thinking around teaching these kids? So it's a cycle. It literally goes from connect, wonder, spark, build, reflect. So it's a continuous cycle. So let's kind of dive deeper into what exactly that means. And we're looking at connecting. So we want to make sure that when we're starting a unit of study, that we want to ensure that our kids know that they already have information coming in, right? And we want to connect the information that we're about to teach or about to expose our students with to their prior knowledge, to their prior learning. They're coming in not half empty, but actually quite full. And we want to experience, and we want to definitely use that. After that, we want to ensure what do they want to know? What do they are really, at the end of the day, they're a huge stakeholder. And we want to ensure that children understand that they have an opportunity to learn something. And so we want them to take that responsibility and ask themselves, really, what do you want to learn? And for those who are working in PYP schools, we call this an inquiry model, right? The wondering. And by wondering, we also mean that they're taking responsibility of their learning. And then once students have wondered, then we can finally create that spark. And we are actually one of the pivotal people to create that spark. Like, what is the new learning that's going to happen? And from the work from Pam and I have been doing, we're all about modeling, showing them how to do things, bringing them on that journey with us. Once the students have an opportunity to spark, then they have students have an opportunity to actually practice it or build based on the actual information that they've learned. So actually using that information to actually do something. And then finally, once kids have actually built something and practiced it, then they're finally going to think about, well, what did I just learn? And wait a second, what did I just learn? And why did I learn that? And how is it connected to the world? And what can I do with this information? Right? Because we want to ensure that kids understand that learning something is not just a small, minute thing for the four walls or virtual walls of our classroom, but there's a bigger purpose to that. There's a bigger purpose outside our physical classrooms. So at Lit Life, Pam and I have been working on using these 5 phases and thinking about, like, well, how do you create units around that? And so this is what we wanted to kind of suggest to you, and I wanted to kind of share with you. So we're looking at, this is a document that we're kind of still working on, and we're excited to share with you because you're our first people who are sharing this with. And so you can see that this is the foundational skills, the constellation, the 5 columns there are the oral language, phonological, print concepts, phonics, and syllabication. And on the left-hand side, you'll notice that those are the 5 different phases. And so what's nice about this is that we're trying to think, like, how can we use those 5 phases in order to really build a unit, right? And so if we can actually go on to, Pam, would you might be kind enough, can you click onto I can hear beautiful sounds in my world? Right, let's click onto that. Let's see if it works. Is it working, Pam? I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is.
The screen should change.
Can you see it?
No, can you actually share your screen, Pam? That screen now?
Maybe it just hasn't popped up yet. See, it just might be a little slow. Can you all see that?
No, we just see the PowerPoint right now.
Okay, let me think about how to do that. Hold on, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to start the share again. Let me see if that will help. Does that work?
Okay. Why don't I share my screen?
Can you see it now? Okay, share your screen.
Excellent. There we go. Awesome.
All right. Yeah, wait. Oh. Okay. wait. Okay, let me go back. Hold on. How's this?
There we go. Awesome. Okay. So, yes. So big celebrations, right?
I know. Seriously. Wow. Okay.
I know. And Pam, the funny thing is that we do this like once in a while. Like our teachers, for those who would do this on a continual basis, we definitely celebrate.
Oh, yeah.
Because good gosh, like the funny thing, a little off topic, Pam and I were like, we're a little nervous about this part. We weren't nervous about the content. We're like, how's the tech going to work? And we applaud those who do this on a daily basis. So in that document, if you click onto that document, you'll notice that what Pam and I are sending you, or will be sharing with you, is literally a unit, a lesson on how to possibly do something like this. So for the first one, and because I'm huge into phonological and phonemic awareness, because I think it's a huge topic that's A, really interesting, and B, that's really needed. So when you look at this lesson, you'll notice that it's been divided into actually 4 parts, which is what do I know? So that's the first part, which is kind of pretty much making a connection to the content. And then afterward, you're going to teach something, which is scrolling at, and how will I grow? So you're actually going to model, and then what is the glow? We're beginning to, as you can see, we're all about shining, and then finally, what will I show? So the lesson actually is divided into 4 parts, and you'll have an opportunity to look at that. But what we've also done in this lesson is that we've created an actual face-to-face model lesson. So that's the first part that Pam just showed us. And the second, virtual teaching lesson, because depending on where you are in the world, you might have the fortunate opportunity actually of having kids in your classroom, or you may still be in the virtual model lesson. So we're thinking of like, how do we create a unit? We can create the unit with those 5 different steps. Pam, can you go back to the actual, the document again? You
mean the PowerPoint?
Yeah, the PowerPoint, thank you, yeah.
Okay, hold on one sec. Now, can you see this?
Not yet.
Okay. Hold on. Let me do this way.
All right, awesome.
All right.
All right.
Now, how does that?
We're getting there. There we go. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Yes.
Triumph again. Yes.
All right. Yes. And then you'll notice that there's another link there underneath there. And I apologize for this, but this is also a lesson. And you'll actually see then me teaching a virtual lesson of actually, what's the word? A manipulation of phonemic awareness, right? So we know that.
Okay. Now let's see if, okay, tell me if you can see this.
All right.
Can you see it?
Not yet. No.
Okay. Not yet. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna do that stop share again and then start, because I think that might be the way to.
All right.
That might be the way to do it. Okay. Hold on. How's that?
It's coming. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So this is obviously during pandemic, because this is in my house, literally this is like in my office. But this is a lesson of, we're giving opportunities and we're giving you a chance to see how you can teach phonemic awareness using the shining reader qualities. And so this was a bit of a recording, and you'll get the link to that. And we don't have to watch the entire thing. But you'll see there's a whole series of these lessons. So if you're interested in something like this, please feel free to text or to message us, and we'll give you that opportunity. All right, awesome, Pam, thanks. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint, because we have a few minutes left.
Okay, hold on. I got to stop and start again here. One sec, PowerPoint. Okay, there we go.
All right, so let's just kind of go back to that second. All right. Okay, so take a moment right now, and because we've shared a lot of information, and just take a moment in the chat and think about, what are you thinking about this? What are your thoughts about foundational skills? What are your thoughts about the 5 phases, and possibly using those 5 phases to create joy for our shining readers while still marrying the foundational skills? Just take a moment and just kind of go in the chat box right now and think about, what is your initial reaction to this? Yeah, thanks, Pam. Yeah, thanks, Beth. Mm-hmm. And it goes back again to what Pam said. It's not one or the other. It is about integration. And I feel like, we love the science of reading, but it's a lot of great research and a lot of great information. But we kept on saying, but where's the joy to this? Like, where can we bring the human side to this, right? And so we want to make sure that we always think about, we're not just teaching reading, but we're also teaching the reader. And at the end of the day, the reader is a human being in front of us. And so we're inviting you to think about like these 5 phases of connecting with students, having them wonder, create that spark, building, and finally reflecting. And I think particularly the last one, the reflection process, is really, really key. Why am I learning this? Am I learning this just because Miss Pam told me I should learn this? What is the bigger purpose to this? And it's really, really important that we instill that with the student, that it's not just about making me, the teacher, happy, but there's a bigger, this is for you as a reader, because at the end of the day, you're going to be a part of this wonderful world, and a wonderful world of reading and wonderful world of writing.
And Vincent, I would just say that I think we really wanted to, really what I think our work has been is about how do we humanize and warm up things that can feel very technical and yet still hold on to that technical that I want my students to read in a very exemplary way. I want to know a lot of vocabulary. I want them to be able to know how to really identify the grammar of language, whatever that language is that they're studying or learning or growing into. But I think something I always found was a little bit missing from the traditional way of looking at some of the science of reading work was a more of a humanistic cultural responsiveness, linguistic responsiveness. I think that what we're trying to say here is that we believe in the development of phonological phonemic skills, the print concept work that we do, the alphabet knowledge we do, and all of those kinds of the work that we're doing. But I think that for us, it's about, let's really humanize it. Let's also make it more structured. So it's not, I better find that phonics activity, but in a case like this where we have a unit around phonemic awareness, a unit around phonological development, a unit around oral language, those units then help us to make a plan that includes the voices and stories of children and their own wonderings and their own development. And I think that's, for me, that's the powerful part of it.
And Pam,
so I know
Pam, can I just add into that? Can I just add into that? It goes back to like, we've all been teachers that are very good and technical and know their stuff, but have no kind of heart to it. Like, where's the, the bedside manner? And that's what, we reading science of reading, my fear was that it would just become such prescription that it became this like robotic moment of like, well, I have to do it this way, or because the textbook says it. And I'm pretty sure we went into teaching not just to teach reading, but to show love and to show the humanness and the moment of like, this is who we are as a community. And so we're hoping that this approach really melds the two ideas of the social emotional aspect of the importance and also the academic importance of a reader. Sorry, Pam.
And the reader, because the reader is neurologically developing all the work that the reader is doing to become aware of sound, to become aware of alphabetics, to become aware of grammar. Obviously, the child learning in multiple languages is doing multiple things every time the child does that. And I want that to be part of this work. That child is noticing their primary language, they're noticing a new language they're learning. They're able to do that code shifting because they're interested and inquiring just the way any young scientist would be. When you think about all the world is looking for a vaccine for this horrible disease, COVID, and you think about a scientist in the laboratory, the scientist isn't waiting for someone to tell him or her what to do. The scientist is using what he or she knows about viruses, about this coronavirus, and what they don't know actually, and saying, I'm going to ask a question I don't know in order to be the best scientist I am. And I think that's been, for me, the exciting part of the work to do with Vincent at Lit Life is really to think about how can we humanize the work of the science of reading and at the same time really honor the fact that neurologically there's some really interesting things that are happening that I want my children to know about. I think they find this really interesting too. I know we have to come to an end, so final thoughts. One is, let's make this work real and delightful. Let's keep those two words in mind, real and delightful. Think again about Carmen Agradidi and The Rooster Who Would Not Be Quiet. That book is a masterpiece of language, full on. That it's a masterpiece. Look for masterpieces. Look for literature that you want to have right by your side to demonstrate to your students the sound of language, the look of language, the vocabulary building, all of those principles that Vincent talked about earlier. Number one. Number two, that we connect the work to social emotional learning and engagement, like I said right at the beginning, and that Vincent has been weaving into his remarks, is that we can't do the science of reading work. We cannot build phonological, phonemic awareness work without a strong sense of resilience and identity in our readers. It's not a waste of time. It's really important. And that without engagement, fluency doesn't grow. And fluency is a really big part of what the brain starts doing when the brain gets used to feeling comfortable with something. Number three, that we use authentic literature to promote the work. Number four, that what Vincent demonstrated was that we make the science of reading curricular, not just a series of lessons. And that's actually something that Vincent and the team at Lit Life work a lot with districts and schools and school communities on is how to make things more curricular to help us as teachers to have a path and have a journey. And then finally, to ensure that all of us, our children and our families too, understand that the work of phonics and phonemic awareness and fluency development is not instead of the authentic experience of literacy, but it's part of it, and it's really a joyous part of it. I noticed actually, as we were putting the slides together, Vincent, I didn't mention it, but it was kind of amusing in a funny way to me about that for some reason or another. I think there are at least 3 slides here where my campers also have broken arms. So please don't associate Lit Camp with that. I'm sure that did not happen. It did not happen on my watch, you know what I mean? But it was kind of funny. But that is just, children are real people. They're experiencing the world in authentic ways, and we want to protect them as best as we can. And in this day and age right now with COVID, it's hard to know what that means, but I think we can do that by being really joyous in the language learning that we do with our students, the literacy learning we do with them, the decoding work. It should all have that sense of joy in it. And I'll turn it back to you, Vincent, for one last, we have 1 minute left or less to invite people to keep being with us.
Definitely, yeah. And so we're in the midst of creating another course that's actually going to dive deeper into this content, looking at what exactly is, what are the foundational skills? What are the 5 skills? What are the 5 skills for comprehension? How can we make sure that the Shining Reader model is actually integrated into that? We're also looking at having virtual coaching from our team, our family of Lit Life coaches. So be on the lookout for that, because we're definitely sending that out in the next couple of weeks. This is information on how to contact us. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have pretty much almost everything there. Twitter, we have our emails there. Again, we will be sending out this PowerPoint, a copy of this PowerPoint, the highlights of this PowerPoint, and actually this video will be also linked out there. For those who have colleagues out in the world or wherever, we're doing this session again in 12 hours. So, so please feel free to share the links because the more the merrier. But we do definitely want to say, first of all, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And because for us, it's a sign, or it's a message to us saying that you care for your kids, you care for your teachers, and that you want them to be happy, but also really, really well-informed readers and writers. And that's really a wonderful blend. And so based on that, thank you so much for spending time with us. Feel free to text us or send us a message, and then we can go from there. Pam, do you want to close off? Anything else you want to say?
I feel that way. I hope for you all a shining day. And there's lots of hope and lots of good things to come. And I'm excited about this work. We're definitely, the children love it. And the work that Vincent leads for us and with us at Lit Life around the integration of science of reading and the humanistic approach is, I think, very, very powerful. So I'm just happy we all got to be together today, and I look forward to all the next steps. So thank you, Vincent, for having me with you today, and thank you everybody for being with us.
All right, have a great day, everyone. We'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.